Hello, folks. This is Rick Manning, President of Americans for Limited Government. Just wanted to get on and talk to you a little bit about some of the things that are happening in Ukraine and some of there's a lot of interesting reverberations on it that are probably some of the most important developments on the international scene for in the past 75 years. So it's we're seeing some real transformation of some things that we've taken for granted over 75 years, and it's going to be this time period we look back on as being one of those times when some of our assumptions shifted. So it's really, I just thought it was important for us to get together and talk. I apologize for being a couple minutes late. I was on with Michelle Swinnick, and Michelle's always great, and she does a program that's online, and she's always great, and I always love talking to her. And so I was a little bit delayed, and I apologize getting on late. It's kind of uncool, and I just want to let you know I wasn't just goofing off. I was doing work trying to talk to people about defunding the vaccine mandates, actually. But let's talk about Ukraine. Here's the single most important thing so far that's happened about Ukraine is Vladimir Putin has dramatically misunderstood, has missed the boat in terms of his analysis on how Germany would react. And we've talked about this in the past. And one of the things that we've written about and perhaps talked about is a frustration that Germany has, in fact, in the past, allowed themselves to become essentially reliant upon Russian natural gas in order to meet their Green New Deal goals. They've shut down their nuclear power industry. There's only 2 nuclear power plants that are left up in Germany. They're scheduled to go offline at the end of this year. They have and hence the Nord Stream 2 pipeline, natural gas pipeline, was important in Germany because it was how they were going to get a significant portion of their natural gas that they need to continue running their country. Germany has become very, very reliant upon natural gas because, once again, they shut down their coal plants. They've shut down most of their nuclear, and they'll shut down all their nuclear by the end of the year if they keep that plan. And so they've basically tried to flip over to all renewable energy. If it sounds familiar, it's exactly what the Biden administration is trying to do here. So they declared war on their domestic energy production. And in declaring war on their domestic energy production, they became reliant on people who have not traditionally been their friends. A year ago, 2 years ago, Donald Trump sat down with Germany, and it was at the UN, actually, and talked about how Germany needed to diversify their supply chain on natural gas, that they were becoming over reliant on the Russians, and how it was silly for NATO to sit there and, on one hand, talk about trying to defend themselves against Russia, which was NATO's function, and on the other hand, have a major country, the biggest country in NATO, Germany, be in fact wholly dependent upon Russia for their ability to exist, for their energy existence. The Germans at the time looked rather smug, and there's pictures of them looking rather smug and kind of laughing about this notion that they would be subservient to the Russians based on natural gas dependency. Of course, that would never happen. Well, lo and behold, what happens in last week? Well, what happens is simple. Russia made it very clear to Germany that they better back off on supporting anything about Ukraine, because they were going to end up paying a big price for their natural gas. They were going to end up having a problem, because while natural gas is on an international marketplace, if you only have the capacity to import natural gas from one place, and that was Russia, then that person who's supplying it can charge whatever price they want to, and you kind of have to pay it. And so Germany was, Russia was threatening massive price increases on natural gas to Germany. And it was and last week we weren't sitting around here, we weren't sure how Germany was going to react. What we found out over the weekend was something that was very, very important. Germany decided that the full-scale Russian invasion into Ukraine awoke Germany to their own circumstance, to the danger they were in. And they had cut off the access to the Nord Stream 2 pipeline and it wasn't really turned on yet. They basically paused turning it on for another 6 months, which was a pretty tepid response in our estimation. But the thing they announced over the weekend that is not a tepid response is they basically said Donald Trump is right. Now, you'll never hear them say that, but they basically said Donald Trump was right. They said, we are going to do something here that's really crazy. We're going to go off and we're going to make 2 liquefied natural gas terminals. They already have one in production. They're going to try to create another one. And so they're going to try to import liquefied natural gas from overseas. And the overseas means the United States, because they want to have, but they could also get it for Qatar. They can get it from Middle Eastern states that have natural gas that they're selling. They can get it from Algeria. They can get it from Nigeria. They can get it from anywhere in the world. Point being, they're diversifying their ability to import natural gas and not being dependent upon the Russians and a pipeline network that they've developed over the years to provide that natural gas to keep Germany afloat. That's an amazing development. It is a complete 180 from where they were a week ago. And it is and it's the reason, and it shows that the German people have decided that they have really shifted gears in their thinking on this. But the thing that's really transformational, that's the good news on the energy front. The thing that's transformational is that Germany has decided they're going to start putting their 2% of GDP into NATO, and they're going to engage in an arms buildup now. And they shipped, for the first time in recent memory, they shipped a lot of heavy equipment, military equipment, to Ukraine. Germany doesn't do that. Germany sends blankets and they send well wishes, but they haven't sent heavy equipment, military equipment, to fight in wars around the world which are in their interests. But Ukraine, they decided with this invasion of Ukraine that it hit close enough to home that they better wake up. Now, the interesting part of that is demilitarization of Germany has been an assumption for 76 years. Ever since World War II, it was decided that we were not going to militarize Germany. We were not going to allow Germany to build an army. We discovered that when they built an army, bad things tended to happen. So we basically provided defense and mutual defense through the NATO, but Germany was really somewhat of a passive partner, and certainly wasn't doing anything independent. Well, Germany just made a decision that they're going to become more aggressive in terms of their own national defense. That pretty much changes the way things are going to go in the world after 75 years of having Germany outside of that military stream. About last 5 years, I'll say, Japan has become much more on the other side of the Axis powers. Japan has become much more involved in military development and has become much more aggressive in that regard, and are now seen as one of the countries that's going to stand should China get out of control. Japan will be one of our primary partners in trying to keep China under control. But so we're seeing now basically the 75-year agreement that the 2 main powers in the Axis powers would step down and not have a heavy military role, would spend their money on industrialization. Now those powers are saying, no, we're going to get back in the game and start using our expertise and technical know-how to build military equipment and become and we could argue whether that's good or that's bad, but it's different, and that's what we're seeing, and that's why it matters. We're getting a lot of comments from people here. I just wanted to take a look here and see what people are saying. Well, that's us. There you go. Daniel Cunningham. Beijing Biden is helping Russia and screwing U.S. This Oblozo regime is out to destroy America. Biden's too stupid and fried to lead anyone anymore, except fellow child molesters. Well, Daniel, I don't know about the last part, but I do know that I do know that the Biden administration has been incredibly naive in their approach to this and approach to Ukraine, and as a result, we have seen some. They opened the door for Ukraine, for Putin to invade Ukraine by okaying the Nord Stream 2 pipeline after Trump had basically blocked it, and B, actually Trump had blocked it, and B, when Biden said that, in some respects, he said he was willing for Putin to do a little bit of an invasion, just a small incursion, and it was a slip of the lip, but it was heard loud and clear by Putin that there would be no ramifications. We saw that with the sanctions that the Biden administration offered, which were tepid, and supposedly they were offering sanctions which were going to be disastrous for Russia, yet they offered pretty tepid sanctions against Russia, and fought against blocking the Russian banks from being able to engage in the international banking system. So it was so the idea that the sanctions were going to isolate Russia really wasn't the case, and part of that's practical politics. Russia then just would go to China and do commerce there, but it was also if you're going to rely on sanctions, you darn well better make certain the sanctions have teeth, and the sanctions that were offered by Biden didn't, and Putin kind of laughed at those sanctions. So that's Biden has been extremely ineffective in it. Let's see here. Okay, here's interesting. Let's just look at what Michael Montgomery has. Do not listen to mainstream media news. Ukraine is a cleanup job to get rid of the power put in place to buy dirty U.S. GOP Obama dread team. Okay, it is an interesting. That's a tremendous amount of the challenges that occurred. A lot of the Russiagate stuff came out of Ukraine, and that's common knowledge. We know that there was now that wasn't the Zelensky regime. That wasn't Zelensky who did that. It was prior reported, I can't remember his name, but the prior president of Ukraine participated fully with the Democrats in attempting to undermine the Trump candidacy and later the Trump presidency. A lot of the Christopher Steele dossier material came out of Ukraine, and it was a straight Democratic National Committee, Hillary Clinton disinformation campaign, working with people who Joe Biden, quite frankly, put in place and had a major role in putting in place in 2014. And so there's no doubt that a lot of the dirty deeds that occurred in our election, many of them emanated in Ukraine. And quite honestly, there was a lot of talk during the impeachment time that a lot of those emanated out of the U.S. Embassy in Ukraine. So you can make a case that there was that it is at some level a cleanup operation. But I'm just going to say that I don't think that you sit there, if you want a cleanup operation, you have to be a pretty callous and dangerous person to say, I'm going to put President Putin in a position, I'm going to prompt him to attack Ukraine, to destroy records, so those records that we want destroyed get destroyed by somebody else. And we're going to risk a guy who's already gone on to full nuclear alert with all the ramifications of nuclear war, if nothing else, of war throughout Europe, we're going to put all that at risk in order to bury some documents. Fact of the matter is, the Democrats control the embassy in Ukraine. Any documents that need to be destroyed in Ukraine have been destroyed, and the people who were involved in that are feeling pretty protected because the person who was leading Ukraine for the United States, Joe Biden, is now president, and so I think they were feeling pretty comfortable. The current president of Ukraine was not part of that. He was elected as kind of the answer to all the corruption in Ukraine, and was kind of like a Donald Trump candidate. And as a result, he was undoubtedly cut out of the loop by his own intelligence people about some of the things they'd done to interfere in the election. So all in all, I think, as we're looking at this particular government of Ukraine, I think they had clean hands. But there's no doubt the prior governments of Ukraine had real dirty hands, and quite honestly, part of that is because we told Joe Biden literally was involved in telling the president of Ukraine at one point that they had to resign because of a massacre that occurred on his watch. And Joe Biden called him and said, "It's time for you to go." And the guy resigned the next day. So America has been intimately involved in Ukrainian politics for a long time. And it is, and so, yeah, it comes back to bite you every once in a while. And that's what we're seeing right now with Ukraine under great duress. And some people really showing up as being truly heroic personas. Well, let's see what else we got here. Trump was right. Yep, he was. Yeah, Steve, you're right. Ukraine has been used over the years. It's a very corrupt place. We all know that Joe Biden's son Hunter was making and has been making lots of money from being a board member of Burisma, which is a natural gas company in Ukraine. And one would suspect that Joe Biden's bank account's taking a hit, or at least Hunter Biden's bank account's taking a hit, as Burisma is kind of wondering what kind of payoff they're getting with a son of a president who's been pretty weak in terms of trying to defend Ukraine's interests. Let's see here. Higher gas goes the region. That is exactly right. 100% correct, Carol. Russia is making hundreds of millions of dollars a day on gas and oil. And as oil prices are driven up, as natural gas prices are driven up, Russia is one of the primary beneficiaries of that. One of the things we've been talking about here at Americans for Limited Government is obviously we have to restore domestic production. We have to juice that. We need to do things like get the Keystone XL pipeline up and running. But that's a solution that is really a 1 to 2 year solution. Immediately, what President Biden needs to do, and I'm not going to say he's going to do it, but this is what he needs to do. He has made a decision in the Middle East that he favors Iran over the arrangement that Donald Trump had made with the southern tier countries, Israel, Jordan, Saudi Arabia, UAE, United Arab Emirates, and a few others, and Egypt. And so there really was a change in the Biden changed everything in the Middle East. And he did 3 or 4 things that are pretty astonishing. The first day he was in office, he took away the terrorist designation of a terrorist group called the Houthis, who are insurgents in Yemen. Yemen is right next to Saudi Arabia. Yemen actually has the capacity to block Saudi oil from getting out of the Arabian Sea. So Yemen's a pretty strategic point. there were rebels that Iran was funding. They were funding them as a literally they were doing it to harass and try to harm Saudi Arabia and destroy their oil fields. Those rebels are constantly sending missiles into the oil fields, Saudi oil fields. They've also have hit civilian centers in Saudi Arabia with missiles. And yet Biden administration determined that they were not a terrorist group and took away the ability and basically opened the door for them to get funding from a lot of people around the world. Secondly, we cut off the ability for Saudi Arabia to get missile replacements for their Patriot missile batteries, leaving them vulnerable to those missile attacks on their oil fields and elsewhere. Because we decided we weren't going to we declined to provide them with those ability to replenish their missile deterrent system, a U.S. system of Patriot missile batteries. We also cut off funding for Saudis to have arms and to buy arms to fight against the rebels, the Iranian-funded rebels. And so we decided we didn't want to be involved in that. That was done in the first month of the Biden administration. And lastly, the State Department has been pushing around trying to open up the Khashoggi investigation again, going after the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. So we told Saudi Arabia, we don't like you very much, and we're not going to be your friend. And while there's lots of reasons not to particularly like Saudi Arabia, and I'm not going to dispute that, the bottom line is, Saudi Arabia is the answer to the current problem, because while they've told Joe Biden no twice about opening up the spigots, if Joe Biden needs to show them that he's not going to want the Saudi government to fail, they've destroyed a friendship, at least an alliance the Biden administration has, and they have to reopen that alliance. And they have to change course in terms of Iran. And if they do that, Saudi Arabia will reopen the pumps, and the gas price will go down dramatically, and we'll be back down to $60 a barrel. That's one way to do it. You don't have to embargo and cut and stop the sale of Russian oil. The best way to hurt Russia is to lower the cost per barrel. Their break-even point, from what I understand, their break-even point is about $80 a barrel. That's a pretty high price, and that's where they really needed to be to make real money. So at $100 a barrel, $95 a barrel, they're doing really, really well. If you drive it down to $60 a barrel, they're struggling to break even in their oil production, and Russia becomes very, very cash poor very, very rapidly. And when you drive and because Russia doesn't have very many things to export, they export oil, natural gas, and vodka. They might export a few other things, but by and large, that's it. So if you're talking about really trying to do economic harm to Russia, the best way to do that is to convince your friends who have lots of oil to start pumping. And on the intermediate term, begin to start pumping again here, increase our pipeline networks, and particularly from natural gas fields, increase our capacity to export liquefied natural gas, and then be able to supply Europe with the liquefied natural gas that they need to be able to not be dependent upon the Russians. That's a pretty basic formula, but it's the formula we need to take, and it's just hard to describe what a wrecking ball the Biden administration has been to our energy independence and to creating reliance on other energy sources around the world. Let's see here. Yeah, the guy's name Robert reminds me. The former president was Poroshenko of. Let's see here. Biden paid by Russia and Chinese. Sanctions on the risk. Yeah, Carol, you're right on the Iran thing. One of the things Biden is trying to do, he's looking at trying to replace our domestic production of oil, our energy independence, by affecting the world oil markets by having Iran pump more oil and be able to do so because it'll be outside of sanctions. And also, they're looking very closely at Venezuela to help Venezuela actually restore their oil industry to such an extent that that we get oil from Venezuela. It's and in that way, once again, the objective you need to understand the Biden energy policy isn't about. It truly is not about um, the environment. It's about making the United States dependent upon other people producing oil and natural gas. It's about making America dependent, making us energy poor, even though we have been blessed by God with so much abundance of energy in this country. And very, very smart people figured out how to get the energy out of the ground, how to transport that energy to places where we then turn that raw material into something that is that's burnable, and turn that into electricity that feeds our homes and feeds our little electric cars that these guys want us to all have. So that's but we've been blessed in this country, and that blessing is one of the essences of our freedom, because we can't just be strangled into energy poverty. And yet that is exactly what the Biden policies attempt to do. He never talks about reopening the Keystone XL pipeline to get oil from Alberta, Canada, a secure location and a secure means of getting oil from there to our refineries in Texas and Oklahoma. Never talks about doing that. What he talks about instead is we're going to have Iran produce oil, run ships here, and we'll unload them in New Orleans and Galveston and elsewhere, and we'll unload them and we'll get them to our refineries that way. So he would rather have us be dependent upon Venezuela, which would like for us to die, Iran, which would like for us to die, than to have us be independent. And when we need oil, to be able to get it from sources like Saudi Arabia and have the ability to get Saudi Arabia to turn the spigots on every once in a while to help drive prices down, and having the negative effect on countries like Russia that desperately needs high oil prices to fund their foreign adventures. So that's, let's see here. And yeah, let's see where we are here. Yeah, it's one of the things. You're exactly right, Antonis. We are in a dangerous situation. At $30 trillion in debt, and we are seeing inflation, not hyperinflation, but inflation, and the possibility of the U.S. dollar not becoming the reserve currency certainly exists. But one of the things that the irony on all this is, and I go back to Saudi Arabia, one of the key elements that have kept the U.S. dollar the world reserve currency is the petrodollar. And the petrodollar is simply this: Saudi Arabia does all their trading of oil in dollars. That's the only currency they take. And so they're effectively forcing, if you want to buy oil on the market, you have to use dollars. And that's why dollars are the dollars the world reserve currency is one of the reasons. The primary reason why the dollar is the world reserve currency. It's one of the reasons why the dangerous game that Biden's playing with Saudi Arabia, it really does have the potential impact of changing the petrodollar and changing the relationship of the U.S. dollar to the world, and how essential it is to being able to do commerce in the world. That's one of the reasons we're able to sell $30 trillion in debt, is people need dollars to do business. And so we're able to sell our debt, which translates into having dollars to do business. And so If we lose that world reserve currency status, we lose the petrodollar status at that juncture. One of the great incentives for buying our debt goes away. And when fewer people are willing to buy our debt, that's when you see inflation. You'll see the cost of our bonds go through the roof, and the amount of money that we have to pay people to buy our debt go through the roof, and that's when hyperinflation occurs. There's an old saying. It says you never know when something's going to happen like that until it happens. But the fact of the matter is, we have been so fiscally irresponsible it's almost unbelievable. And I'm going to tell you folks, in a few days, 11 days, Congress is going to pass a budget or pass funding for the next 6 months. And if you thought, and it's going to be every bit as fiscally irresponsible as anything before, they will not have learned their lesson. They will not cut spending. And so we're going to have more debt piled on this year. So that's just the reality. We have to elect people into Congress, whether they be Republican or Democrat or independent or libertarian. We have to elect people into Congress who understand that we cannot continue to spend trillions of dollars more than we bring in. And that includes whoever gets nominated for president and is going to win the presidency in 2024. They have to understand, first and foremost, that the budget matters, and that we cannot just spend money without thought to what the future is. Either party. I'm actually going to kind of roll it in now because I'm losing my voice for one thing. But I did want thank you guys for listening in. Go to getliberty.org, and sign up for our free newsletter. Subscribe to somewhere around here. There's a button. Subscribe to this to our YouTube channel. Subscribe to our Rumble channel. We're on a lot of different venues. We want you to be able to know what's going on in real time and know when things are really happening that or make a difference in the world. And so we appreciate the opportunity to be with you, and we wish you a fond farewell till tomorrow.